Good morning, everyone. My name is Susan Bonner. I am a journalist with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and I host a daily news program called Your World Tonight. Watching that video, and listening to the talk this weekend, I wonder if we should sometimes put a disclaimer at the beginning of our newscast that says, indecent exposure may occur. With that, let's begin our panel. We have an esteemed panel of guests. On my right, Sean Fraser, who is the Justice Minister and Attorney General for Canada. And beside him, we have Pedro Sánchez, who is the Minister of Defense in Colombia. Next, Rushan Abbas, who is the Executive Director for the Campaign for Uyghurs. And Senator Kevin Cramer from the state of North Dakota. So my plan with this panel is to get to the floor as quickly as possible. I know that we've all been listening a lot over the last 3 days, and we want to get as many voices into the conversation as possible. But if I could start with each of you giving your thoughts on how you view the concept of decency in democracy, how you would define it, and how you would define its importance. Minister Fraser.
Yeah, look, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to participate. When I reflect on the theme of the discussion, I think about democracy demanding decency, both in terms of inputs and outputs. And before I specify what I mean, I think it's important that we actually ask ourselves, what does democracy mean to us? It's an awful lot more than a system of voting to me. It's a means by how we organize our society, how we make decisions, particularly in countries like Canada that have a rich diversity across regions, across cultures, across languages. We need to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to have a say, even though not everybody's always going to get their way. This demands that, from an endpoint point of view, governments and political actors protect the institutions that people can rely upon, ensuring there's respect for the rule of law, for transparent decision-making, accountability at the ballot box, but also in between elections by reporting to an elected legislature. But it also engages outputs. People aren't going to continue to believe in democracies if they see their standard of living fall. They need to see, as the economy grows, that they share benefits in that economic growth. And it's important, too, just to maybe tie off the point, because I don't want to dominate this conversation, this isn't just about what governments deliver for people, but how people engage with one another. In today's world, we too often treat people that we disagree with as our opponents and enemies rather than our friends and neighbors. We are constantly fed in today's world through algorithms, perspectives that seek to confirm our biases rather than challenge our perspectives. This is a long stretch from the world I grew up in when my parents would have friends over at the kitchen table. They'd have vigorous debates, but at the end of it, they'd go about cleaning up the dishes, taking care of the kids, and helping out one another in their community. To the extent that we can see people we disagree with as our neighbors who have a different point of view, I think that level of decency will improve not only the institutions that serve us, but the outcomes that we enjoy.
Minister Sánchez, your thoughts.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. From my view, decency in democracy, looking to the armed forces, I will say 4 things. First of all, is decency in democracy means moral and respect for the law. In that case, the armed forces is the moral backbone of the democracy. Decency is no principle or political principle, that is military imperative. Second one, decency in democracy, using by the armed forces, give us legitimacy. That is the big difference between criminal groups and armed forces. Third one is armed forces are the shield of polarization. We are living in one world that we watch in that video, and when the armed forces remained as non-participant or not participate in the political discussion, etc., that is the guarantee to protect all citizens, doesn't matter the ideology and other things. And the last one is we are living in a new era, the era of the intelligence artificial. That technology cannot replace our responsibility. Maybe the technology can help us to make decisions, but not to replace responsibility. So decency in this moment is important to keep the armed forces as a backbone or moral backbone of the democracy. It's necessary to keep the legitimacy. It's necessary to be the shield of polarization, and it's necessary to keep the responsibility in using the armed forces.
Ms. Abbas.
Thank you so much, Peter and the Halifax team, for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it because we don't have a lot of chance to tell our stories. So democracy means for my people survival, life, and the future. Let me just tell you a little bit about my personal story. It'll take a couple minutes here. I am Uyghur and living in the United States since 1989. I was raised, born, and educated in Rimchi before I came, after I graduated when I was 21 years old. And I did not know anyone in US. I didn't speak any English. I came because I was looking for freedom and democracy, which I found in the United States. But living in the United States in the last 36 years did not save me from the CCP's retaliation. I escaped from the communist regime, but they followed me to the United States. Recently, last 8 years, the Uyghurs are facing full-fledged active genocide with mass detention, families scattered, and our identity and the language and religion are forsaken. Children, 1 million Uyghur children are taken. Uyghur women are facing forced sterilization, forced abortion, and forcibly marrying Han Chinese men. Yet, the democracies, the world, are standing still without taking the real action. I have my dear friend here, Tancho Gaitso and the Lapsang Sangay from Tibetan community. They all know very well that China started this in Tibet, the dystopian surveillance system and the mass eradication of culture and religion. Then they expanded and they perfected in my homeland, and while using my people and my homeland as a testing ground. Then they demolished the democracy in Hong Kong in front of everyone's watch. We stood and did nothing. The democracies did not defend the freedom and the democracy. And now threatening Taiwan. And what's next? All of you, everyone will be next, because China's goal and the mission is not just staying within China's borders and just what they are doing to the Uyghurs, Tibetans, or Southern Mongolians and the Hong Kongers, but its goal to implement this to all over the world. And I speak here at the cost of my own sister's freedom. In September 2018, I participated in a panel like this at Hudson Institute. I was working as an international business development director. I was not even full-time activist. I told my boss that I'll be back in a couple hours. But that day changed my life. When I spoke that, which was televised on YouTube, when I spoke about China's genocidal policies, outlining the fate of my in-laws, 24 people from my husband's family went missing. The Chinese government took my sister, Dr. Gulshan Abbas. She's in jail now since September 2018 for my freedom of speech as an Uyghur American. She's a retired medical doctor. But almost 2,000 years, I wake up with her, I go to bed with her, I go around and tell her story while I'm trying to warn the world the China threat. But I see many people still staying silently. The decency, the topic today, is supposed to be courage, honor, and the speak out even if there are consequences. It's easy to criticize the United States, Israel, or anywhere else. When you speak about atrocities in the world, you don't speak about the Uyghurs. You don't speak about China's atrocities. What does that mean? For leaders, for countries, this is not just about the moral clarity or courage or conscience anymore. This is about your own sovereignty, because silence is the oxygen of the tyranny. Thank you.
Senator Cramer, your thoughts on our topic of decency. Democracy demands decency. How do you view that?
Well, first of all, I was an average basketball player in high school, and if we had a 20-point lead and there was 2 minutes left, the coach would say, "Get in there and try not to screw this thing up." Thanks a lot for putting me right behind her. That's anyway. I mean, that's pretty. Anyway, well, one of Cramer's convictions is I don't offend easily, which can sometimes make me offensive. But your message is very important, because we talk about decency and watching that rather indecent video. And
why
as well
do
as
you
the earlier,
see it as indecent, sir?
Because this has become an absolute throw every arrow you can at Donald Trump while we feel entitled to everything he has. And that's not a great way to build friendships. Remember what I just said. I will offend, but I'm not easily offended. But your point is very important. Is decency what words we choose, or is it what we stand for? I suspect that the Christians, and I know that the early video, early in this forum, said that our liberty doesn't come from God, it comes from people. Well, our Declaration of Independence in the United States disagrees with that. And I think the Christians in Nigeria today are probably feeling pretty good about Donald Trump's position. And maybe he's a bit blunt and even a bit brutal at times, but at least he's fighting the right fights. Having said all of that, I'm going to go back to the beginning. As we prepare to celebrate in the United States Thanksgiving in a few days, I celebrate in a rather special way. I am the 10th great-grandson of William Bradford, the governor of Plymouth Colony for about 20-plus years, the best documenter of the voyage of the Mayflower, who writes in his journals that are now a book, as I'm sure many of you know, about the voyage and how the Mayflower Compact came to be. It came to be because there was, as they were getting close to disembarking, about half of the crew, at least, if not more, that were starting to celebrate the fact that they were about to have complete freedom. They absolutely had to answer to no one. As they came from England, they now had literally no one to be accountable to. And it quickly became obvious that the leaders of the Pilgrims had to have a document. And they institutionalized 199 words to help govern free people. But he also writes about an incredible episode where, as crew members who were not Pilgrims, who were not separatists, were getting ill, that it was the separatists that were taking care of them, that were caring for them, that were loving on them, that were praying for them, providing for their needs. And that example of Christian decency actually caught on. That even among the crew members, that the example of that the firsthand experience with decency was, if not converting them, at the very least taming them. I sit here with two of my very best friends in the Senate, who not only do we work together, not only are we all three on the Armed Services Committee of the United States Senate, but we pray together every Wednesday as part of the Senate prayer breakfast. We don't even all agree theologically or doctrinally, but we do love each other. I worry that there's not enough example of that. And I also worry that most of our constituents, in our form of democracy in the United States, which is different than pretty much everyone else's, we elect our president. We don't have a prime minister. We have three co-equal branches, I guess, and that gets tested from time to time. But at the end, it always works out. But Angus is an expert on Abraham Lincoln, and if you ever want to hear a great presentation on the second inaugural address, I recommend Angus King. He knows all 700 words pretty well. But Lincoln, long before he became president, was worried about the erosion of the institutions of government. In 1828, 1838, at the age of 28, this young lawyer gave a speech called the Lyceum speech. It was one of his longer speeches. I guess he got much more efficient with time as his speeches got shorter and more efficient. 270 words, the Gettysburg Address. Anyway, but the Lyceum speech was him anticipating mob rule if we didn't maintain the institutions that the founders gave. Remember, the founders were just dying off. They were just, the last of them were just sort of dying off. And he was concerned that leaders in this new free world, they didn't want to plow old ground. They always wanted to, take it on themselves. And his plea was to maintain those institutions. And he did it very eloquently. And frankly, he said that if we lose this freedom, it will be suicide.
Well, if I could stay with you on some of the points you've raised there, Senator. You talk about it's not, don't judge us on just what we say, but on what we do. And
I didn't quite say that, but okay.
That was the gist of it, if
Sure.
not your exact words. Do you think that the atmospherics of what is being said in our democracies can sort of change the actuality? And by that I mean that in that climate of anything goes talks and the kinds of things we saw on the video, that does alienate members of society. It erodes trust in democratic institutions, which you've just talked about being so important in Lincoln's speech.
Yeah, certainly words matter. Certainly they do, but before we mourn the death of democracy in America, let's not forget he did oversee a civil war where 700,000 Americans killed each other. And here we are today. That we are far more resilient than we think or than we fear. But words do matter, for sure they do. And how we receive words matter. But what was missing from that video were things like a weekly revelation of new subpoenas on, issued by the previous administration on members of Congress on their phone records simply because they were Republican. That's a problem. That's indecent. It may not be a harsh word, but it's a pretty vicious weapon of the legal system that was used, and we continue to, like I said, find new revelations of what was going on. So, yeah, I think our words matter. I try to pick mine carefully, but I'm also not afraid to confront the issue.
Each of the three panelists here have some, shall we say, issues with America at the moment. Do you see, how would you put decency into the equation of dealing with America on your major issues? Mr. Fraser.
Yeah, look, obviously we've had a disruption to a long-standing trading relationship that's causing concern for businesses that do cross-border trade, for workers who rely on those economic outcomes. But I want to take a long view of the relationships that we build, foster, and maintain on the global stage. The United States has been Canada's strongest ally and largest trading partner for a very long time. The issues in my own household are somewhat more complicated, my wife being a dual citizen, of course. So we get a healthy dose of American politics in our dinner table conversations. But realistically, I think if we can better focus on our shared priorities and try to figure out how we can advance them by working together, by maintaining open dialogue with one another, that's the kind of thing that will speak to my earlier point. People need to see these outcomes actually land within their own households. And though when you see a policy decision taken in another country you might disagree with, you might see a policy decision taken that impacts your ability, you should feel free to be able to address it head on, to advance competing ideas. But you should be careful not to blow up a relationship that has existed for the entirety of our history. If the short-term political interest is reactionary in nature in order to speak to a narrow slice of the electorate to serve your own political interests, but you do damage in the long term, what you're going to end up seeing as people experience diminished quality of life outcomes, they're going to turn not to someone who defends the institutions, but to some future populist leader who will be empowered by an erosion of our norms and our rights today, who will say, well, let's polarize ourselves out of this system altogether. And I don't think that that is a healthy outcome in the long term. So when it comes to dealing with not just the United States, but partners around the world, we have to recognize that we've built a system on purpose through the development of independent institutions, international institutions, domestic institutions, that allows us to peacefully disagree, to share openly the concerns that we have with one another, make decisions that respectively serve the interests of our constituents and our citizens. But if we move away one iota from the goal of working together to advance shared prosperity, the long-term outcome is that people will threaten to pull themselves out of these systems and institutions that have protected peace and prosperity really for the better part of the past 3/4 of a century.
Minister Sánchez, in your country, a very big problem clearly is crime focused on drugs. And as you watch the world look at your country and how you're dealing with it and how that issue is being framed in America and elsewhere, how do you view the idea of negotiating on those terms?
First of all, I was thinking maybe the world 18 or 8 decades ago, nowadays, comparing with that era, nowadays the world is more conflictive than before, but the people who die in the war is less. Two reasons, I think so. First of all, the thoughts, the beliefs that the people conflict each other, and another part, the rule, the war, the law of the war, make that the people don't die as before. But talking about strategy, ends, way, and means, maybe we have the same ends. For instance, with the United States, we are thinking to defeat the drugs, to defeat the international crime. Maybe the difference is between the ways, the strategies. So in that aspect, it's necessary to talk each other, to talk honestly, to talk with decency, to find the problem. I think that the enemy is not the nations. The enemy is the international crime. So it's necessary to strengthen the international cooperation to defeat the international crime. How to deal in this area is talking or giving these spaces to talk and sharing information. We are thinking also to develop one initiative similar to the NATO, but against to the international crime. That means sharing information, that means talking in the same language, that means using the same techniques and procedures to defeat the international crime.
Does it also mean it also means in your situation, dealing with a situation that you did not ask for off your coast? How does that factor into how you look at this topic of decency in democracy?
Could you say in other words, please, help me?
The situation that Colombia and Venezuela are facing in international waters from the United States as it proposes a solution to deal with the drug crime. How do you think about that vis-a-vis the subject of decency in democracy?
I am the Minister of Defense. I am not the President, but I will say each country has the sovereignty to apply its own forces to defend its values, its ends, its people. In the case of Colombia and Venezuela, we are fighting, in the case of Colombia, we are fighting very hard against the international crime. We share a lot of information with the United States. The last week, the President of Colombia was talking with all agencies, intelligence agencies that we have in Colombia, to be clear that we share information only to apply the force according to the international law. We share information through the Defense Department of the States, and we apply all procedures in that way. But of course, the United States has the sovereignty, has the autonomy to use its power, to use its capability, and when we see for instance, the strike against vessels that's happened in international waters, not in Colombian waters. So we are focusing just only to affect the terrorist group in our territory, using our weapons, respecting the law, and sharing information with all agencies to defeat the terrorist groups, the drugs.
Senator Cramer, would you like to comment on this issue?
I would, because for those of you who don't know, Minister Sánchez, he's a hero. Besides being a minister, he's a hero.
know.
And I'm just gonna recommend you look that up. But one of the things that impresses me so much about Minister Sánchez is that he, and he articulated it now just now quite well, and that he has clearly a responsibility and a shared mission in sharing information, helping the United States and others in the hemisphere combat the scourge of illegal drugs, which, by the way, a lot of presidents have said they would do. But he also never loses sight of his first priority, which is to protect the sovereignty and the security of his own people. And he does the two together with, I think, great skill. So thank you for that. That was my only thought as he was talking.
Well, would you like to expand a little on how you see him as a hero?
Well, I think we only have 23 minutes, but he saved in a very heroic way a young girl. It's a rather well-known story, and I would recommend you look it up, huh?
Yes, he loved me. I served in the military forces during 35 years. I was the commander of the Joint Special Forces in Colombia. And we conducted one mission, maybe someone knows about that. Do you remember the 4 children lost in the jungle during 40 days? I was the commander of that operation. And that showed us the most important thing that you have in the military power is the willingness, is the faith, is the persistence, not the means, not the assets.
I think maybe we'll open it up to the floor now. I'll start here, if we could.
Thank you very much. Senator, you said the Christians in Nigeria today are probably feeling good about Donald Trump. So I'm a Christian from Nigeria.
You're an expert.
1 out of 100 million Christians, very small sample size. Yes. I do not feel good about Donald Trump. He called Nigeria a disgraced country. Frankly speaking, that's not so bad because he used to call us a shithole country. So it's a kind of improvement on disgraced countries is an improvement. Is there a better way, for instance, a decent way to offer help to someone? So if I looked at all the shoes on this panel, and you guys are wearing nice suits, everybody is wearing nice suits, but there's a differentiation of shoes. The senator's shoe is different. So if I was your friend, after this panel, I would buy you a gift, a nice shoe to match up with your suit. I wouldn't have to say anything about the state of your shoes that made me buy you those shoes. Is there a way that powerful countries can help less powerful countries, poor countries, without doing it in the way that leaves them worse off? For instance, America went to Libya. Libya has a causative effect on the terrorism challenges that Nigeria and the Sahel is facing. I don't want to talk about the other places America went to. Let's just stick it to Nigeria. Since Donald Trump said what he said for Nigerian Christians, Christians have been abducted in the church in the northwest of Nigeria.
Sure.
Muslim students have been abducted. I do not speak to the causation, but there's a correlation between Donald Trump, from the point Donald Trump spoke about Nigeria's challenges and the escalation of terrorism. So, decency apart, there are rules of engagement. There's a global rules order. There's a rules-based global order. Is there a way to speak about Nigeria, first of all, in a respectful, decent way, not even just as president of America, but as a human being? and much more so as the President of the United States of America, that I will always respect as a person, and frankly speaking, Nigerians continue to respect generally. Also, is there a way to help Nigeria? Because, for instance, one of the reasons why we failed woefully at fighting terrorism was because despite having the money, despite having the intention and the motivation to buy weapons from America for so many years, we were denied. Eventually, we got them, and for some of those weapons, they also told them where not to use those weapons.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask and sit down, is there a way to decently help Nigeria without making things worse and without disrespecting Nigerian Christians and Muslims?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
No, I think that
Great question. No doubt the answer to your question is certainly. And I want to address both things. First of all, the words do matter. They do. You were kind in suggesting, is there a way to do some things and not needing, to make things worse by the wrong words? The right words help. A more delicate way of saying something is obviously better than a more brutal way. That said, at the end of the day, a lot of people have promised things to Nigeria and several African nations. And by the way, once again, I point to my colleagues who are two of the biggest advocates for our relationship with Africa. And I won't go into all the ways that they do that or that we do it together. But the actions do matter. A lot of people will say the right thing and do the wrong thing. Other people will maybe say the wrong thing and mean to do the right thing. Is there a better way? Certainly. But one thing, your example is very specific and it's appropriate in your case. But you also touched on a larger issue of it's not just one country. It's not just one-on-one. There was an earlier panel, I forget which one, that got to the point of, and it might have even been Senator King, I don't remember, but one of the senators spoke to America's retreat. I think it might have been Tom Tillis, now I think of it, America's retreat from several areas, which has left them vulnerable to the predators, if you will, to China especially, and their predatory financing and behavior. There are lots of ways, and I think, for example, one of the areas where President Trump and I have disagreed quite openly is in the effective use of USAID. Those things need to be conformed, for sure. But when we talk about democracy, and I talk about the difference in the United States as being more self-governed, he is a reflection of the country. All of our democracies, democratically elected leaders are a reflection of their country. And that's the pastoral role they should play at the higher level. But at the governing level, I think, globally speaking, aid to friends and would-be friends and possible friends is a bargain compared to munitions. And I just think we need to be more directly engaged in your challenges.
we're going to go over to this side of the room, and as the microphone makes its way, I would just say that you talk about the president being a reflection of the country. America is very polarized, as are many democracies.
Yeah.
And do you believe, I guess we can further this discussion about whether and how decency, the erosion of decency in our national and international conversations has led to the polarization. Democracy creates the conditions for polarization. And does it also offer the solutions, perhaps through decency,
Sure.
to get us back on track in a open conversation? But
Sure.
before you comment on that, perhaps we can weave it into, I think, a question over here.
Thank you. I'm Ariel Montatos. I'm Mexican-American. I'm the chief correspondent in the United States for Televisa. First of all, I would like to say that I think we should be grateful and recognize the presence here of the senator, because it's important to have different point of views. And secondly, Senator, you were saying that words matter, and that Donald Trump, in this case, is fighting the right battle. Let me take the example of Ukraine. Making peace in Ukraine, ending the war in Ukraine, is the right battle. But if Donald Trump is calling President Zelensky a dictator and is giving the side through words and through actions to Vladimir Putin, that is the right battle, but it's being fought let's say, in a way in which it's making it worse. Do you agree with that? Do you think that that is what's happening in the case of President Trump, that he might have the right objectives, but that his ways are actually making things worse? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I don't know that whether they are or they are not, but remember, for 3 years, the United States offered sort of lip service and some defensive weapons with strict restrictions on how to use them. And at a time when we, several 100,000 deaths ago could have maybe brought an end to this war, we did a lot of talking. The negotiations that are going on right now, which is what I suspect you're talking about, make no mistake, in my mind, and it is crystal clear to me, and I entertain in my office Ukrainian leaders just at least monthly, if not more often than that. I am 100% on the side of Ukraine on this. There's one perpetrator and there's one victim. But every life, whether it be Russian or Ukraine, matters. And so the president's, and you articulated it well, his goal of ending the war is genuine, it is sincere, and he wants to stop the killing of everybody. Whether it's making it worse or not, I don't know, because what I don't know and what you don't know, what none of us know, and what frustrates the media to no end is that none of us know exactly what's being negotiated and who's asking for what. We presume when we read a certain line in a certain document that it's the Russians asking for this. And it may very well be that the fatigue in Ukraine is something different. One thing's for sure, you guys, one thing we have to celebrate today in this forum is that the decision on whether to agree or not agree is between one country and another country. The rest of us are just facilitators. Now, some of us maybe matter more than others. I argued with President Biden over greenlighting the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which I think became a very valuable weapon for Vladimir Putin, and we handed him the bullets. It was silly. But that said, I don't know whether it's being helpful or not being helpful, but I am confident that both sides want to come to a resolution. And the first thing we need is a ceasefire. I don't even know how you really have a good negotiation, frankly, without a ceasefire.
Well, on the issue of a good negotiation, does it not start with respect, and is respect not paired with decency?
Well, remember the players, certainly it is, but at the same time, we don't know the tactics that are being used. And I think we oftentimes think we do. I mean, all the advice that President Zelensky is getting from people around here this week is fascinating, except none of them are the president of Ukraine.
Let's go to a question over here in the middle. Sir, in the second aisle. Yes. We need to get our other panelists in on the discussion. The senator is in the hot seat.
Ms. Abbas.
And we'll bring them in. Yes.
I'll try that. Yeah. I'm Lobsang Sengye, Tibetan lecturer at Harvard Law School. As my sister Rushan said, there is crime against humanity and genocide going on in Xinjiang or East Turkestan. And they tabled a resolution at the United Nations. 49 countries voted for Uyghurs. 150 countries, including Nigeria, Global South, they voted against. UN Human Rights Commissioner has come out with a report saying there is crime against humanity going on in Uyghur people. All the third world countries deny it. I have also been a Prime Minister of Tibetan government. We tried to move resolution at the United Nations. All the third world countries, they vote against you, saying there is no human rights violation in Tibet. Can you imagine? Which is more indecent? Few words matter. Indecent, it's hurtful. But to deny that there is crime against humanity going on, as per the report of the UN Human Rights Commission by all the third world countries and in Tibet, that's more indecent. I think we all need to acknowledge. For that, sometimes, of course, there is double standard in the present world order, including the US. Including European countries. We lobby. Some people meet with you, some people don't meet with you, some people deny you entry into the foreign ministries. I accept all that. But the freedom-based world order that we have now, where we can stand and talk and criticize senator, can I do that in China? I can't enter the room. I will be in jail before I get here. So we must acknowledge, and then the other countries to support that China. As though it's better than the present world order. I think that's the most indecent thing you can say or do.
Thank you for that question. And yes.
Yes, that is the beauty of the democracy that we are talking about. We can sit and criticize the senator and a country or a president, nothing happens to us. And I just told you that when I criticize China from United States, from Washington, my sister is paying the price. So the problem here is not just the countries and the leaders don't have the courage to speak about the Uyghur atrocity or criticize China. They deliberately actually enabling China's economy to murder more people when they continuously supporting China's forced labor transfer. The Uyghurs are being taken as slaves. Like I mentioned yesterday when I asked the question, just last year, this atrocity is not ended. Just the last year alone, 3.34 million Uyghurs transferred to China proper, working in all these famous brand names from all over the Western democracies, basically supporting the companies as a supply, manufacturing the supply chains. So basically, my sister may have made the shirt on your back, the shoes you are wearing, the purse you are carrying. When we look at the history, and the last couple of days we saw this a lot on the videos and all that, it happened before. And there is a vow, never again. So do we have the decency and the courage to uphold the vow, never again, with the real actions to follow? Or are we going to witness the repeat of the 1938 Munich Pact in the sake of economy? Because when those leaders, and from Muslim countries, when China is calling faith is a mental disease, criminalizing every aspect of normal practice of Islam, when the Muslims cannot speak out, when they list all the atrocities, they don't say anything about Uyghurs. And the leaders too. Some of them, they don't say it because they just simply forget it or they don't want to say it. Or some of them are afraid of pronouncing it because it's difficult to pronounce. It's Uyghur. And some of them are purposefully just the appeasement to Chinese government. So we need to think about, this is not just about the Uyghurs anymore, as I mentioned. It's about the world that we leave behind for our children and for our grandchildren, because we are all responsible for what happens next. If we don't speak out now, then the only voice left will be one of regret. I want to finish it with Xi Jinping's direct quote translated from Chinese. 2-3 years ago, Xi Jinping's speech, this particular quote was promoted a lot. He said, I quote, "It must be that the fate of all people in the world is the same." What does that mean? They do not tolerate for so-called, statistically, they say we are 12 million Uyghurs. Because of the language we speak, the religion we believe, and the look, how we look, how do they tolerate for democracies or everyone else? So when I say everyone is next, I am not saying this lightly. I know how it is to live in an authoritarian system like China. So we need to defend the freedom with decency and the courage. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the floor. The young man here.
I'm Nicola from Italy, and I'm 15-15 winner. How can we ensure decency in democracies if political competitions are increasingly relying on disinformation, manipulation, and digital outrages instead of truth-based dialogue?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think your seatmate here wants to add to it.
Yeah, Nicholas from 15 at 15 too, and from Ecuador. And how can we guarantee decency if these leaders that have come to power are convicted criminals, demonized media, or ex-guerrillas?
Okay, well, let's deal with the disinformation and the changing world in which we do not agree on the truth, let alone the way we should talk to each other. Minister Fraser, what are your thoughts? How do you think about that?
Yeah, look, I think about it often, and I alluded to this in my remarks. Increasingly, we're divided into camps based on things we believe. We tend to consume the same media as our immediate circles, and we, less often than I would like, actually have competing ideas come to a head for people to consider the perspective of one another. There's a couple principles at play here that I think we need to remind ourselves of. One of the hallmarks of democracy is the ability for people to participate in these conversations freely, to share their perspectives, knowing that they won't face some unreasonable consequence as a result of their actions. The flip side of that equation is we're free to ignore the people that we don't wish to listen to, and instead engage on our own terms. This problem is going to dramatically increase as we have technology adoption happening at a pace that is far quicker than governments traditionally have the ability to adopt laws in response. But what it comes down to me is protecting the freedom for people to participate in these conversations, but putting institutions in place to actually make sure that we have the ability to know the difference between what's real and what's fake, knowing that we have protections for an independent media that isn't going to be subjected to the erosion of their freedom to participate in the political marketplace and political conversations by governments who would instead prefer state-controlled media. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that citizens have the opportunity to become educated about the issues from reliable sources of information. Some of the institutions that I think will help with that is obviously investments in public education, but in addition, the protection of the independence of the media and the courts to sort out, based on evidence, facts, science, and data, what is true. If we can't disagree on what facts are real, we have no hope to sort through collectively very challenging subjects. So to me, it's maintaining the freedoms for people to take part in conversations, putting institutions in place that will allow the Canadian public in our country, but the public in any country, to understand what the real facts are on a given issue.
Can I ask you, splitting off from this just a little bit, we've explored decency in terms of its effect on how citizens view their democracy. We've explored it in terms of, very powerfully, the human rights question. What about national security and the questions of sovereignty? And you know why I'm asking you that, because it's become a sore point in this country with our citizens.
Certainly, and that was a central theme of the last federal election campaign, was some of the commentary that around Canada becoming a 51st state, which Conservative, Liberal, NDP, that's not something that Canadians are comfortable with. Over the course of my life, we've often defined ourselves on being different than our closest friend and neighbor, being distinctly Canadian in many ways, as other countries I'm sure would as well. But let's not pretend that these issues of sovereignty are a uniquely Canadian or American concern. We're talking about decency and democracy and protecting our institutions at a time when there's a member of the UN Security Council who is sitting in open defiance of the very values that underpin the UN Charter. These are not light decisions around unique policies. These are the deep values of sovereignty, of territorial integrity, of self-determination of peoples. And if we don't have the institutions to be able to stand up to these egregious violations and norms of international law, then I have a suggested project that we should take on collectively. The reality is, if we bake rights into our laws, domestically, nationally, internationally, and they exist on paper but are not enjoyed in our communities, then those laws are not worth the paper on which they are written. We need to have institutions that we jealously guard, who can independently, whether it's recognizing the reports of special rapporteurs of the UN, whether it is holding people who commit human rights atrocities to account in international criminal law, or whether it's having the opportunity for individual citizens to have their complaints adjudicated, or national governments to have an independent trade dispute resolution mechanism. Without these institutions, the decency will not be possible in a democracy, because democracy will simply fade away.
The Canadians have run out the clock, folks. We've come to the end of our excellent panel, and it's a huge subject, and we just really skimmed the surface. But I think we did it in a way that will keep us all talking and thinking about it. So thank you very much to the panelists and to the conference members. Thank you very much.